I live in a cozy little home with my son and husband. Since our home is on the smaller side, we usually go to other people's homes for holidays or parties. One past year, we wanted to do something just for our family, so we decided we would go camping for the 4th of July weekend. Our county also doesn't allow fireworks, so we thought we'd find a place in the next state over and have a different view, see a fireworks show, and maybe even light off a few of our own. Our son had never been camping before either, so it would be an exciting first time, and he was really looking forward to it. We went and bought a tent, sleeping bags, and other camping essentials to start preparing. We started going over safety tips as well as making sure we had plenty of first aid stuff, bug spray, sunscreen, and aloe. Some things, though, are a little harder to prepare for. The time came to head out to the campgrounds. The 4th was on a Friday, so we decided to go on Thursday. That way we could get there, look around the area to decide what we wanted to do. Then after we enjoy the 4th, we could spend time doing what we wanted for the rest of the weekend. When we got there, we found our lot that was right by 4 other tents. One was a middle-aged couple that was there with their dog. 2 tents were a family of 5, the parents, 2 kids around 9 or 10, and a toddler. And the last one reminded me of ourselves, a couple with a little boy. As we started setting up, all the kids around were ready to play, going over to each person's tent and asking the kids' ages and names, and if they wanted to go play by the water. He was my firstborn, so I was quite protective of him and didn't want him playing by the lake without us, so I agreed to let him play on the small playground equipment that was right next to our area. I could see him from there, so I was okay with it. The 4 kids were playing and talking about whatever kids talk about, and the parents of the single boy, I'll call him Kyle, came over and introduced themselves. They said this was their second attempt at camping. They tried last year and were forced to evacuate after someone caught part of the campgrounds on fire. They said it was most likely caused by a fire pit that wasn't allowed that got out of control. They said it was fairly close to them because they could see the flames and had to pack up in a rush, which scared Kyle. From what they explained, the poor kid was pretty scared for a while to do anything close to fires or camping related. They mentioned how they eased him into it though by camping in their backyard, which made me think we should have tried that first to see how our kid would react. Overall though, they wanted to say thanks and for letting Kyle play with our son Nathan and compliment how well-mannered he was and being willing to pull Kyle in with the other kids. It was a very proud parent moment for myself. That night and the 4th itself were both great. Since everyone was so kind and welcoming, we had a cookout together and put all of our food into it. The kids were having a blast. We gave some of our little fireworks stuff like smoke bombs to the larger family since they didn't have any, which kept them occupied. I will say those older 2 were a little more on the daredevil side. They were trying to throw smoke bombs in the air and catch them, hold them in their mouths, tried throwing rocks from the gravel road at birds, things like that. Thankfully, Kyle and Nathan stepped back from those activities. Saturday, we decided to have a little more time relaxing. After sleeping in a bit and having breakfast, we decided to go for a little walk through the trees. My father-in-law always took my husband fishing and hunting and was always big on the outdoors, so he knew his trees and wildlife and loved teaching Nathan just the same. To our surprise, Kyle was just as interested and asked to join us. I don't think I would have been too comfortable with it, but then his parents asked to join too. They said they would show us where the fire was and then we could go to a more secluded part of the lake where there were less people. We're not familiar with this campsite, so we agreed and thought at least we'd have some more peaceful time away from the other rowdy kids. So we put on our swimsuits under our clothes, grabbed the things we wanted to take, and headed off. The fire occurred on the other side of the grounds. There were several trees that were still standing, but obviously dead from the fire. There was a patch of what appeared to be dead grass where they attempted to regrow it, but it wasn't doing very well. They had posted a sign as a reminder that fires weren't allowed outside of their permitted pits or grills, too. The area was empty of people, too. It appeared to be open, but no one was staying there. It definitely didn't look pretty, so I'm sure that was why. From there, we decided to go swimming since it was empty. We hung out in the water, we all talked, and the boys were having a lot of fun by themselves. I think they wanted that more, to be able to do something a little more innocent on their own. I felt comfortable enough that they wouldn't get into trouble, and with no one else around, I could loosen up a bit more. At one point, the boys started gathering fallen branches, mud, and rocks to make a cave for a rabbit they saw. I wasn't going to be the one to tell them that they live in holes because they were having fun, so I let them go. They started talking about being short on supplies, and my husband had mentioned one of the trees that were burnt, that they would have softer and easier branches to break off, so they went to start collecting them. They did this once and came back pretty quickly, but the second time they left to gather more, I didn't see them come back for a few minutes, so I hollered for them. When they didn't respond or come back, I got a little suspicious and decided to head over to see what was going on. As I walked over the small hill, I noticed them quickly shuffling around dirt like they were trying to find something or bury something. I just asked them what they were up to, thinking they were just playing some game, but they were both acting standoffish and quiet. I asked if there was something wrong, and Kyle responded no and that he wasn't feeling good anymore. I started to approach them to figure out the change in tones when Nathan said they found something bad. Thinking they were playing with something they found like a lighter, I approached them smiling, saying it would be all right, whatever it was, when Kyle started crying. Nathan pointed to a pile and started talking fast about how they were just trying to get dirt. I was trying to calm down two young boys while also looking over to see what they found, when my stomach dropped. There were bones in the dirt. It was a hand, with part of an arm sticking out from the ground. I just stared at it for a minute, not knowing how to react. I finally grabbed both of the boys by the arm and started rushing them away while shouting for my husband. They all started running over towards me. I guess my tone sounded alarming too. I explained to them what I saw, and the guys went to look. My husband agreed to stay nearby just in case, and the rest of us hurried over to a campsite nearby to ask someone to call a park ranger. From there, it became a blur. The rangers came out and looked. They had to call the police and tape everything off. We were all obviously on edge. After being interviewed by the police and the poor boys being questioned, we were finally cleared to go back to our campsite. At this point, we were ready to go. This definitely wasn't going away, so we decided to just leave. We spoke to law enforcement, gave them our contact info, as well as Kyle's family, because they still seemed like a great little family, and left. Later on, Keith and Marissa, Kyle's parents, contacted us and told us that they identified the body as a little girl who had gone missing about a year back. It was then assumed that the fire was likely used to cover up the murder, though the body wasn't found at that time. It was hard to have that conversation with Nathan and explain that there are some evil people out there, and that's why we are so picky about who he's with, where he goes, and that we want to make sure we know where he is. He was too young to have to witness something like that. It was a terrifying thing to witness, and I don't even know if they ever found the person who did it. But I hope that no one I know ever has to witness or go through something like that. Back in the late 2000s, me and my then boyfriend Omar were taking an impromptu road trip. We just wanted to get away, so we just set off heading east in whatever direction we were pulled and stopped at places we were drawn to. We didn't have a lot of money, so we slept in our car a lot, which was fine, as it gave us more time to look around at places to go. However, our idea of places to go also included urban exploring. It was fun enough finding places local to explore, but even better when out of state, places you've never been to or heard of and going in blind. We were driving through Mississippi at the time when our car started having issues and overheating. Thankfully, we were near an exit, so we got off the freeway with our hazards on, slowly drove into the closest parking lot of a Sonic, and turned the car off. We had to figure out what was wrong with our car, and most likely without moving it, so we got directions to a nearby gas station and started walking. I was so incredibly thankful it was September, so it wasn't very hot. On our way there, we noticed what looked like this big old house with a fenced-in yard, till we started looking at it more. It was actually an old church that looked like it had been closed or abandoned for a while. At that moment, we could read each other's minds. We knew we were going to be staying in this little town for the night. We got to the gas station where they thankfully sold antifreeze and started our walk back. On our way, we looked around to see if there was anyone watching, we checked for no trespassing signs, and looked for the best ways in. However, the best way in would turn out to be the front gate that didn't have a lock or a sign on it. Once we got back to our car, we poured in the antifreeze and thankfully that seemed to help. We decided to eat while we were there and then left to find a good place to leave the car while we went exploring. Turns out there was a small motel not far off from the church, so we agreed to park there. It was already evening when we first pulled into Sonic, so we didn't have to wait much longer till it got dark. Once we were good and didn't see anyone loitering around the motel, I emptied my purse, so all I had on me was my pepper spray and a flashlight, and we left. As we walked to the church, we opened the gate and quickly ran up to the door to get in. The door looked like someone did a poor attempt at boarding it up, but missed one whole side of the frame, as we could easily slip through and inside. Once in, I immediately noticed how creepy the main hall was. There was spray paint on the walls that said, "Welcome." It looked like someone had taken the boards that cover the windows and made a sign that, again, said something like, "She welcomes all here." Weird, but probably people that snuck in trying to make a church creepier than they are. We walked over to the right that had a couple of rooms. It looked like it was for children based on the decorations and bright colored paint that was peeling from the walls. The first room seemed to have a really old TV in it, but the actual center of it was busted out. There were a few toys in a small chest in the back, as well as a little cubby shelf with different names on it. Don't get me wrong, I love doing this, but seeing places like this with a name attached to it gives me a weird feeling. It makes it more real or brings it back to life in a sense. I proceeded down to the next room, which was then when things started to get weird. The room had been stripped. The cubbies and shelves on the wall had been ripped out. The light fixtures and wiring seemed completely gone. The carpet had started being ripped up where it could be, leaving the bare wooden floor underneath. But the creepy part was in the middle of the room. There was a pile of toys, or rather, things. More specifically, it looked like anything with a face. Dolls, cars with faces, VHS tapes with faces on it, the clock with literal hands in it and eyes, anything you could think of. However, it was all red. It looked like someone had poured buckets of red paint on the stuff and just left it. I thought that, once again, it was just someone trying to be creepy, so I just left. As Omar and I started walking to check out the other side, we could smell something that was like an incense or a candle. Going further in the hallway, though, we couldn't smell it, and we definitely couldn't smell it on the other side either. Curious to know what it was, though, we decided to go to the only other place left, which appeared to be the main chapel area. We slowly creaked the doors open and went in cautiously. This is where we became a little more on alert. At the altar, we could see what looked like lit candles. Omar was hesitant to continue at first, worried someone could be in here, but it wasn't that big and I couldn't see anyone from where I was, so we agreed to walk further in together. As we did, I started to notice weird symbols on the walls, and they appeared to be written in red paint, just like the room we first saw. Omar then pointed at the pews that also had the symbols all over them. I was starting to get some weird vibes from this place at this point. I had never seen these symbols before. I was far from being well versed in different religions, but these seemed more cryptic. However, the altar is where I waved the flag. From the entrance, I could see the candles, but couldn't really make out anything else up there. Once we approached it, there was a pew that was up there, but still facing the same way. I was startled at first because there was a tarp over it, and it looked like someone was under it. Omar softly kicked the pew to see if whatever was under there would budge. When nothing happened, he slowly pulled the tarp back. I almost got sick. It looked like a pig that had been dead for a very long time, which explained why we couldn't really smell anything. But the podium had a disturbing framed picture on it. It was a naked woman that looked like she had a long cut from her neck to her belly button. She looked like she was sitting on one of these very pews, legs straight down and crossed at the ankles, an arm stretched out across the backrest. However, she was alive and smiling. The podium also had what we were smelling. It was an incense that was almost out, and the candles we saw were those fake battery ones. At this point, we were more than on edge. This meant someone had to have been here, and recently. Omar didn't want to stick around anymore, and I certainly didn't want to get to know anyone that did this, so we bounced. We quickly and as quietly as we could went right back out the front door. Omar had me go out the door first, and when I turned back to hold the board open some, I noticed he was looking to the left. I told him to come on when he finally walked out and pushed me towards the gate. Once we got out, we took off to our car, and when I thought we were just going to chill for a bit, he actually drove off. He said he would feel more comfortable if we got away from there. He didn't talk much while we were driving, so I did a lot of the talking, trying to make jokes about what we saw to lighten the mood. I think we went a few more exits before we ended up at another hotel. After we slept that night and headed off the next morning, it was at that time he finally told me what was wrong. He thought he had heard a noise when we were leaving, and when he looked over, he saw a man in a dark blue parka-looking thing holding a huge knife, just watching us leave. He wasn't comfortable staying there in case they came looking for us, so that's why we left. He hadn't said anything to me because he didn't want me to be worried. I was okay with that too. I felt bad that he had to carry that on his own, but I am thankful he was watching out for us. We still like to do this, and it hasn't stopped us, but if we see something even remotely off, it's not worth the risk, so we just leave. Thankfully, we haven't run into any more pigs since. When my parents were still together, my younger brother and I went to a public school for elementary and middle school until they split up. My mom got custody of us and remarried. However, because of my stepdad's job, we had to move. My stepdad, Charles, was a bit too uppity, in my opinion, which then began to warp my mother into the same type of person. Because of this, they felt our family was too good for public schools, so we had to go to private schools when we moved. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure there were plenty of kids there that enjoyed it. My brother was still in elementary school, and he seemed to like it, but I hated it. Most of the teachers were really strict. If you were late at all, even if it was because you just had locker troubles, you were sent away and your parents knew about it that night. Thankfully, there were some kids that were like me, forced into private school thinking it was a better education and that it would save the troubled kids. We would grin and bear it and then have our fun outside of school. Thankfully, most of our parents felt we had to be good kids too and didn't question us hanging out with each other. That was our chance to ride our bikes and skateboards around, take turns playing on our handhelds as long as we wanted, and just explore places we shouldn't have. Some of my friends were a little more intense than others, like bringing alcohol to school. I'd be lying though if I said I didn't partake in any. I suppose it was my way of acting out. I only got to see my dad on weekends and some holidays, and I didn't want to move, go to a new school, and meet new friends. I had to leave all of that behind, and like it was no big deal. I was never happy about that. So after school games, we would hang out and enjoy some party time, free of adults. Just to explain a little bit as to where we would hang out, our high school was pretty secluded. It had a long entrance and a pretty big parking lot in the front that wrapped around the side and into the back, which is where the buses parked to drop us off and pick us up. Behind the school and parking lot was our track field, and behind that, and on the other side, it was still fenced off by trees, and a lot of them. I knew the woods went back pretty far because during one of the track meets, one of the girls on the team, Dana, had gone back there with me and we made out. It was an awesome place to go to hide from others and just chill. They just had a small gate that went over the entrance, so it was pretty easy for us to sneak over it and come and go. At this time, Dana and I had started seeing each other quite regularly. Her parents seemed nice enough, but of course, being kids still, neither of our parents wanted us to be alone. So the closest alone time we got was at these parties and track meets. It was a Friday night and we were going to meet our friends at the school to hang out for a while. The 5 of us got there, set up our little crappy radio, and Dylan shared the refreshments. We were all talking, complaining about school and laughing at things that happened and enjoying our time. I think it was about an hour in or so when Dana said that she had to use the restroom, so she was going in the trees and told us not to go in there. I waved her on and we kept talking. I was a bit buzzed at this point and didn't realize that Dana hadn't come back yet till one of the other girls mentioned it. We agreed to have one of them go look for her in case there was something wrong. After a few more minutes, she came back saying she still couldn't find her. I was just thinking either she didn't look hard enough or maybe Dana was either hiding or passed out. So I pulled out my little flashlight and started looking for her. After several minutes and calling out for her to no avail, I went back to see if maybe she made her way back in the process. She had not come back. At this point, I was starting to get a bit flustered. First, I was getting mad at them, saying the prank wasn't funny, but when their face was just as concerned was when I started to really get scared. We gathered our stuff and started looking around for her. One of the girls, Tammy, tried to call and text her, but Dana just had a little prepaid phone, so we didn't know how much time she even had on it. but both went unanswered. We called out for her, paired up, and still nothing. We ended up making our way to the other side of the trees, which seemed to just be a gravel road, but no trace of her. At this point, with all of us out of ideas and terrified, we had to call an adult. Tammy called her sister since she was the one that dropped her and her friend off here. We explained to her what happened, and she also suggested we call our parents. None of that was pleasant. We had to explain what we were doing out there. We had to explain every detail as to where we stayed, where she went, full statements, which also meant our parents now knew. So yeah, I got grounded, but I didn't even care about that. The police were out there looking for Dana that night, and they never found her. I know there were rumors floating around about her running away or being kidnapped, but I just knew she wouldn't have ran away. She wasn't really troubled. She seemed just like us, but never hinted she wanted to leave. It was about 2 or 3 weeks later when they finally found her. She ended up stumbling into a gas station wearing like a nightgown, and they called the cops. Unfortunately, the rest of this is just from what I've heard from the news and rumors. I heard at school that the person working at the gas station that night saw her come in and she looked disheveled and malnourished, but she didn't say much to the guy other than wanting to go home. She never returned to school. Never saw her when she returned. I asked my parents if they would take me to see her, and they were hesitant at first, but surprisingly, my mom said she would ask if she could have company. Unfortunately, as I was told when I got older, her parents wanted nothing to do with us, thinking I may have had something to do with it. I guess the cops didn't though, because I was never brought back for another statement or anything. Or maybe that was Dana reaffirming our innocence. Apparently, she didn't talk about it for a while though. I wouldn't learn what had really happened until I saw it on the news. That, and I started putting the pieces together based on the questioning some of us students were getting by police and other teachers at the school. It was them basically looking for a person in the questioning of her abduction. The person in question was one of our substitute teachers. School definitely felt different, and even among the teachers, but I didn't realize that may have had something to do with it. He did end up getting caught, sickeningly, him and his wife both. It was stated that Dana was pretty close to them as she had started dog sitting for them and got to know the couple. That night, he was driving by and apparently Dana had made her way through the trees and he stopped her and put her in his car. He then took her home and they kept her there that whole time. She managed to sneak out at some point and just took off to find help. I felt awful, and at times I still do, thinking I could have prevented all of this, but I've gone through counseling since to try and help. I've also since graduated from a different school, of course, but still have not had any contact with her. I just hope that she's been able to move on and live a happy life since. So that, my friends, was another true scary story collection. A lot of pretty creepy moments in this one. I had this irrational fear as a kid. I don't remember what I watched, but I think it was probably something on the news. But every time I would see like a trash bag or a plastic bag on the side of the road, I would like freak out thinking that there was a body in it. I don't know what I watched, but I probably shouldn't have watched it. And it's irrational, but it definitely terrified me. So, what about you guys? Did you have any weird fears as a child or anything now? I won't judge you. I don't like crickets. I won't get on that tangent again, but I don't think they have a purpose either. But anyways, if you did enjoy this video, please do give it a like below. And if you'd like to hear more content like this, consider subscribing. And lastly, don't forget to leave me a comment on your thoughts. And with that being said, friends, I hope you have a fantastic week. And until next time, take care.